crab. There's an old shop in a small town on the Sea of Japan in a district once called Kashiwazaki. The building still stands. Every summer when the woman who told me this story went home to visit family, she'd pass by that shop and feel a chill she could never quite explain. Her grandmother grew up there, and when she was 18 years old, she watched a dinner party turn into a curse. It started with a shortage of crab. It ended with two men torn apart, their bodies pulled from a river with the meat stripped clean from their bones, as if something with claws had been very, very patient. This is her grandmother's story, passed down in the way the best ghost stories always are, at the table in the dark by someone who swore every word of it was true. Chapter 1. The Boy at the Riverbank. Our narrator's family ran a grain merchant shop, well off, respectable, the kind of household where traveling poets and painters were always welcome to stay the night or the season. Her great-grandfather, a man named Masueman, cared more for haiku and art collecting than he did for ledgers. He left the shop to his clerks and spent his days indulging his hobbies, and one hobby above all, crab. He loved eating crab the way some men love sake. So when he decided to throw a dinner party, inviting 4 local friends along with 2 house guests already staying under his roof, a poet named Yasui and a young painter from Edo named Bunna, he made sure everyone knew what the main course would be. 7 guests, 7 crabs he'd counted carefully. Then an 8th guest showed up. His name was Sakabe Yomoshiro, technically a masterless samurai, though nothing about him looked down and out. He was the older brother of a respected local official, but poor health had cost him his inheritance years ago. Instead, he'd become something else entirely, a physiognomist, a reader of faces and fortunes, trained in Kyoto, well-dressed, well-spoken, wandering from province to province with nothing but his trade and his uncanny reputation. And he hadn't been invited. He'd simply been passing through, visiting his younger brother stationed nearby, and dropped in. Masamon, delighted, waved him straight to the table, which left the kitchen in a full-blown panic. 7 crabs, prepared for 7 men. Now there were 8 at the table, and not a single spare crab in the house. The old cook, a woman named Sugi, sent the household scrambling to every fish seller in town. Nothing, not the right kind. Not the flat reddish-purple crab with the pale mottled shell that Masueman prized above all others. A young manservant named Hanbei finally ran off into the dark to search further afield, while the rest of the kitchen staff wrung their hands, and the 18-year-old girl serving that night, our narrator's grandmother, tried to keep the whole operation from falling apart. She brought the problem to Masueman directly, hoping he'd let it go. He wouldn't hear of it. "I already told my guests there'd be crab tonight," he said. "Search the whole shoreline if you have to. There's no feast without it." So they waited, and waited, until finally, breathless, Hanbei came back, with a strange boy in tow. Nobody recognized him. 15, maybe 16 years old, wearing a short, dirty work jacket, carrying an old fish basket. Inside, 3 crabs, exactly the kind they needed. The boy wouldn't sell just one, all 3, he said, or nothing. He'd come a long way to bring them. Nobody in the kitchen had time to argue. They paid what he asked. He took the money, slung the empty basket over his shoulder, and vanished into the night without another word. Nobody thought to ask where he'd come from. Nobody thought to notice his face too closely. They just boiled the crabs. Chapter 2. The Face of Death. The sake flowed, the food came out course by course, and the evening settled into the easy warmth of a good dinner among friends. Finally, the crabs arrived, steamed, glistening, one to a plate, and Masueman rose to present his prize dish with real pride. "This is the real treat of the evening," he announced. "Please, everyone, enjoy." He reached for his own plate, and that's when Yomoshiro, the physiognomist seated in the place of honor, spoke up. "Wait, please, wait." Something in his voice stopped every hand at the table. He stared hard at Masueman's face. Then he lifted a candle and slowly moved it across the room, studying each guest in turn. He even pulled a small mirror from his robe and checked his own reflection. A long silence. Then finally, "Something's very wrong here," he said. "Someone at this table is marked with the face of death." The color drained from the room. This was a man known for reading fortunes with uncomfortable accuracy. And he wasn't joking, and he wasn't performing. He was afraid. His gaze swept the table again. and then landed on the one person he'd overlooked entirely, the young serving girl standing quietly by the wall. For a moment under that candlelight, she was certain she was looking at her own death. But he studied her face and simply nodded, nothing there, and turned back to the table. "Whatever you do," he said quietly, "no one touches that crab. Take it away, all of it." It didn't take much arithmetic to work out whose plate he meant. 7 crabs had been portioned out to the 7 original guests. The 8th crab, the one bought in a rush, from a boy nobody knew at the last possible minute, sat in front of the host himself. Masueman ordered it removed at once. Yomoshiro added one more instruction. "Don't feed it to anyone in the kitchen either. Throw all of it away." They tested it on the family dog. The animal was dead within minutes. They tried feeding a neighbor's dog a piece from one of the other crabs just to be sure. It was completely fine. Only the 8th crab had been poisoned. Only the crab meant for Masuman. He'd come within one bite of dying at his own table. The relief should have been overwhelming. Instead, the dinner died where it sat. Nobody had much appetite left. The guests made their excuses and went home early. And the household turned its attention to 2 mysteries at once: who had poisoned that crab, and where that strange boy had come from. The 2 remaining crabs from the boy's basket were left in a corner of the kitchen overnight, meant to be tested the next morning. By dawn, they were gone, simply gone. No one could explain it. Chapter 3: What the River Took. The next morning, Masueman went straight to the district office to thank Yomoshiro's brother, and more urgently to find Yomoshiro himself. He wanted to know how to protect his household from whatever this was. Yomoshiro's answer gave him no comfort at all. "You're safe for now," he said. "But I don't believe the danger has passed. There may be more trouble coming for your family. Be careful and never eat crab again." Masueman swore on the spot he never would. Meanwhile, Hanbei and another servant, Isuke, had set out at first light to retrace the mysterious boy's path, asking at every fisherman's house along the shore, working their way north toward Izumozaki, where crab of that particular kind might come from. No luck, until they reached the mouth of the Sabaishi River, where it meets the sea. There, standing at the water's edge, staring out, a boy. The same build, the same look from behind as the one from the night before. Hanbei ran ahead and grabbed him. Isuke, following at a slower pace, watched his friend seize the boy by the shoulder, exchange a few words, and then, somehow, get pulled straight into the river with him. Both of them under the water in seconds. Isuke ran for help, brought back 6 fishermen to search the current, but found nothing. No bodies, nothing at all. Isuke made it back to the shop alone, white as paper, barely able to speak. Masueman sent men out immediately to help with the search, including, against every instinct telling him to stay inside and away from it, the painter Bona, who'd been commissioned to paint 10 crabs for Masueman's collection and had 9 finished already. He put down his brush and went to see what had happened. It was around this time that Yomoshiro appeared again at the shop, having heard the news in town. "Your master hasn't gone out, has he asked urgently. Told that Masueman was still safely at home, he seemed relieved, but insisted again and again that under no circumstances should the master leave the house, whatever news arrived. Then he asked who else had gone to help with the search, and when he heard that the painter Bona was among them, his face changed completely. "Send someone to bring him back now immediately." The messenger was too late. Word came back that Buna, standing at the same riverbank among a crowd of fishermen searching the water, had lost his footing on a crumbling section of bank and slipped straight into the current. This time there were dozens of people right there, and still nothing. No body surfaced. No one could even say which direction the water had carried him. Masueman collapsed on the spot when the news reached him, a full fainting spell brought on by shock and grief on top of everything else. He was carried to a back room to recover, and it took most of the afternoon before he was steady enough to sit up. That evening, as the household tried to process 2 missing men in one day, the poet Yasui came running out of the back room where he'd been sitting with Masueman, shouting for help. Something had rustled under the veranda in the garden. He'd looked over, and seen 2 large crabs crawling out from underneath the floorboards, claws raised toward the house. Masumon took one look and fainted again. That's twice in one day. The household called for the doctor a second time. Whether the crabs were real or a trick of a terrified, grieving man's eyes, nobody could say for certain, except that Yasui swore he'd seen them too. And there was one more thing that made it hard to write off as imagination. When someone finally checked the room where Bunna had been working on his crab paintings, the 10 crab commission he'd left unfinished, they found his paint dishes overturned, ink and pigment smeared across the 9 finished crabs on the canvas, and small trailing marks in the paint that looked unmistakably like something with claws had walked sideways across it. A week later, the river gave up its dead. Bunna and Hanbei were found, both bodies terribly disfigured, the flesh stripped away in places down to bone, faces and limbs unrecognizable. The fisherman who recovered them had no doubt what had done it. The boy from the riverbank was never found. No one in the area had ever seen him before that night, and no one ever saw him again. Masuemon kept his promise. He never touched crab again for the rest of his life. And beyond that, he got rid of every piece of art, every ornament, every object in the house that so much as depicted one. Scrolls, screens, tobacco tins, anything with a crab on it, gone. And every so often, in the dim hour before nightfall, the family would swear that 2 crabs were creeping across the garden again. No sea crab could survive that long under a veranda, of course, but the story never changed no matter how many times she told it.